Hey, hello. It is the end of the year, and with that, I am feeling at least a little bit introspective and retrospective. And with that, I recognize in the middle of the year, I teased the idea of doing a question and answer video in relation to hitting 2,000 subscribers, and I never did that. But I also never did a proper Booktube newbie tag. I haven't historically done a lot of tags, and while I introduced myself, I did it in a very melody fashion and kind of long-winded, anecdotal, lots of stories. I'm not saying that's not where we'll end up, but I am saying I think that today would be a great day, especially because we have had growth over the last year. There are a lot of you that are new to the community, and I am so happy to have you here. But to do the Booktube newbie tag and just kind of reintroduce myself, as well as slipping in some of the questions for the 2K Q&A, though I would never pretend that there were, a plethora of questions, but I do want to answer them. And so I guess to start us off, hi, my name is Melody, and on this channel we talk books and book adjacent things. Those adjacent things usually are adaptations, but I like to leave the window open, or the door open, I should say. I am not going to be climbing through any windows for other things that may strike my fancy as I see fit. And so that is what we do here. And if somehow this is your first time here, welcome. I would love for you to hang out more. If this is not your first time here, welcome back. And I'm so grateful to have you here, especially, like I said, in the season of gratitude. And I am hopeful, though I recognize I have failed in fulfilling this promise in the past, to post a little bit more throughout December. Now, this is reliant on the fact too, or subject to the fact too, that it is my busy season at work and I have a full-time job. So we'll see how we do, but I hope to be seeing you more over the course of the next month. So with that, let's go ahead and dive into some of these questions. And while I'm getting started here, you could always like and subscribe as you see fit. But the first question is, why did you start this channel? And I started this channel in 2020, spring of 2020. That's actually a lie. I had posted some videos in the fall of the year before, so 2019, but it was just kind of feeling it out, and I didn't start posting regularly until 2020. And this was, a combination of things. It was lockdown and looking for an outlet and connection. It was being slammed at work and needing a creative outlet. And it was having been out of book selling for a year or two and feeling kind of adrift. I have always been someone very much within the literary landscape and part of literary conversations, and that talks about books on the regular and is used to talking about books. And not having that in my daily life was really hard for me. I missed it. And while I had gone through phases of things like blogging, there was an immediacy to YouTube, and I started to get into YouTube as a viewer over the course of that spring a little bit more actively. And additionally, while I don't claim it often because I am aware of my framing and lighting and my inability to capture my best angle on most days, but I have a minor in telecommunications. Now, I only went through one video editing and sound editing class. I know barely the minimum, because even within those classes, it became very obvious to me that I was way behind as someone who did not go to a high school with an AV club, and honestly forgetting that AV clubs even existed. And so YouTube seems like the perfect kind of creative outlet for all of these interests, while also promising the potential of building a community of some form. While I had blogged historically, it always felt like those posts kind of went out into the ether. And to a certain extent, that is the internet, right? And that is definitely how I feel here some days. I think we will touch on some of that in another question. But there is more of a sense of community here than I have experienced on other platforms. And while I am not always the best at being involved in the community because of, just time being what it is, I really enjoy it. I enjoy getting on here and talking about books and connecting with you. I enjoy connecting with other creators through their videos. And yeah, so the next question is, what are some fun and unique things you can bring to Booktube? And so I guess in context of the fact that I have been on Booktube for 4 years now, though it feels odd to say that. It always still feels odd to even claim the title of Booktuber because of probably imposter syndrome that we will circle back to a lot. And I feel like I've been saying circle back a lot recently. But modesty aside, to even start a channel, you have to intrinsically believe you have something to say. And I do intrinsically believe I have something to say, though I would never attempt to portray myself as an expert in anything. Sometimes I do feel a little jack of all trades, master of none, but I have varied interests even across genres, and I love talking about books. And I have been reading for a long time. I have been a voracious reader since I was a kid. I have never had any periods where I was not a reader or that fell to the back burner, while I have had years recently where I haven't been reading as voraciously as I did in my mid-20s, which we can chalk up a little bit to, of course, adult jobs that require more mental energy, but also to ignore the fact that YouTube takes time and that I have decided consciously to put some of my energy here would be dishonest. But that being said, I have read a lot of books. I think by current count now, I have been on Goodreads since 2007, so it is a pretty extensive history of my reading, but it is not exhaustive. And I do think, while I believe I transferred all of my reading logs from 8th grade through sophomore-ish year in high school, that did have a pretty exhaustive list. Again, that isn't even representative of everything, but I do think I accidentally gave my parents permission to throw those away, which is kind of sad because I can't trust the dates of a lot of those early reads in Goodreads. I didn't really care about importing the dates when I first transferred my reading from the logs to the website in 2007, and now I'm much older and I do care. And so by Goodreads numbers, I have read 3,121 books. We are also just 11 shy of 1,000 young adult titles, and I had in my head that we could do a 2K YA video, but also kind of circling back to a discussion we had earlier this year, I just haven't been reading young adult as voraciously as I used to because, spoiler alert, I am no longer a young adult. So I bring all of that reading history and perspective with me. Additionally, I have a background as a library assistant in high school through early college, so I have the kind of perspective of working in a small town library. I was a bookseller for many years in Chicago, so I have the perspective of a bookseller. I was a literary agent intern for a number of years, and so I've seen some of that side of things. And then parallel to that, I have a background and a degree in literary management and dramaturgy within theater, and I read for script development across a kind of variety of experiences, whether it be for major theaters in internships and apprenticeships, whether it be for developmental opportunities like, well, I guess it doesn't exist anymore, so the Sundance Theater Lab, or whether it just be for friends and colleagues and smaller theater companies within Chicago proper. Now, I would never claim my career in literary management and dramaturgy is or has been as robust as I envisioned it when I graduated at 23, 22. But that's kind of the nature of life. But I've been trained to think about things a little more analytically, so it's balancing kind of like that analytical look at things with the, I hope, undeniable passion I bring to reading and the kind of emotional responses I have to books, and just kind of trying to find the middle ground there and just enjoy the conversation around books while also wanting to give honest opinions and honest reactions. So I hope all of that brings something to the table, and I like to think I have a decent personality, but I cannot speak to that. That is beyond my purview to view with any kind of objectivity. And additionally, I've been trying, especially lately, to allow a little bit more of that personality and not hide completely behind analysis and just find that balance. And I don't think that I've ever been not genuine or not letting that come through, but just allowing a little bit more of that intimacy and that vulnerability through being a little bit more candid, like right now. Which moves us into the next question. What are you most excited for about this new channel? Replace new with old, but just what excites me about being here. It kind of circles back to one of the previous questions, but I crack jokes when I first started the channel, I think, maybe I've let them kind of bleed into recently as well, but that part of the reason I first started the channel is because my book clubs were sick of me, or that I could only be in so many book clubs, and I love my book clubs. And Emily, I know you have invited me to further book clubs that I declined being involved in because of the pressure of reading books for book club and not being great at our existing book clubs. So that is not a slight on the book clubs, but just the sense that I don't want to dominate the conversation in book clubs. My book clubs have a great balance. We all have opinions, and I also think we generally banter very well and kind of build on the banter of the books, which I enjoy. But selfishly, I love the ability to go off on tangents, even if I do try to kind of rein them in. And I think that generally they are relevant, otherwise I try to cut them out. But the ability to just kind of talk about something in depth and have that space to kind of babble. And I think this is evident even within my Feature Fridays, which started out attempting to be very focused book reviews, and they still are attempting to be very focused book reviews while also digging deeper into a title. And it's one of my favorite things I do on the channel. And yet I've seen the time on those videos creep up and up, and every week I sit down to record a review, I always have this worry in the back of my head that I won't have enough to say about the book. And then I sit down to edit and I'm like, well, you could have reined that in a little bit. You probably could have been more succinct, but it is what it is. Okay, the next question is, why do you love reading? Which is a very loaded philosophical question for a tag video. And I think that it's hard to kind of divorce myself from my love of reading. And it's been something I've been sitting with the last couple of years, even in conversations with my dad and just people close to me, this idea of not defining myself only through my identity as a reader. And especially within the last few years where reading has become so much more popular, which I love because it broadens the community, it gives me more of a community, but it's a popular activity and I can't define myself completely by a popular activity, even if reading feels so intimate and personal. And I think that is part of what I love about reading, is that the journeys you're going on with reading are so intimate and personal and immediate to you as you're reading. And then you can shut the book, close the book, however we want to say it. And now, especially, you can find an entire community of people to talk about that incredibly intimate experience with. And so it's both an intimate and solitary endeavor, which as an introvert, I very much enjoy, and this communal experience when we think about these stories on a broader scale, which as a still social introvert, I enjoy. And I love the full spectrum of reading. I know that there's constant discourse and debate over how we should approach reading and what reading is and what reading should be, in terms of, should we be reading to learn? Should we be reading for enjoyment? And I read for all of it, and sure, a little escape as well, but I don't think any of them are completely isolated from each other. And I think it's such a complex ecosystem, and I love how many new ways I can engage with reading in the modern moment. When I was in high school, for high school graduation, one of my gifts was a giant Coach bucket bag. I still have it. And I used to joke at the time that I judged my purses by what books I could fit in them. And honestly, to this day, I still stand by that. And I also think that purse listings online should tell me whether it fits a paperback and or an e-reader. That's another story, but I judged this bag. I said this was kind of my pinnacle of a bag because I could fit something as large as the historian in it. And now you could fit the historian on an e-reader if you didn't want to lug the historian around with you everywhere. And also, living in the city, I think there's a joy in the community of reading, in both shopping in a really thriving indie bookstore scene, but also seeing people reading on the train or people reading in coffee shops, even when it means I cannot read in a coffee shop. I went to Andersonville a couple of weekends ago and I had grand plans to sit and read in a coffee shop, and every coffee shop I wanted to read in was full, which also just was an indicator that it is now fall and we were losing those outdoor spaces. So I guess all that's to say too, I also enjoy the reading culture, the reading aesthetics, even if this is not, sadly, an aesthetic channel. But I love it all. Okay, the next question is, what book or series got you into reading? Which feels like another very loaded question. I talked about some of the books that have shaped me in my video for my birthday last year, 33 for 33, where I kind of go through 33 books that have made up me and my reading life in whatever way. But it's hard for me to pinpoint like the book that turned me into a reader because I've always been a reader. I grew up with literacy and being read to, and all of that was really prominent, which I am incredibly grateful for. And so if we go back to like picture books, is it Hop on Pop? Is it Lily's Plastic Purse? Is it Harry the Dirty Dog? Is it Strega Nona? Or does it go into early reading? I don't remember many of the chapter books except things like The Boxcar Children. And if you watched my video, you know that I have a lot of feelings. I think I talked about this, about The Boxcar Children, the way it started versus it turning into a mystery series, which I still read voraciously, but I did miss the living out of a boxcar genesis of the first book, but then that transfers to mysteries like Nancy Drew. And more importantly to me personally, the crossover Nancy Drew Hardy Boys books. I don't think I ever read any Hardy Boys on their own, but I loved those crossover books and was probably an early precursor or indicator that I would down the line be interested in fan fiction because I did go through a crossover fan fiction phase as well. But then moving into elementary school, we have probably what is actually a very seemingly out of character interest in that I did love the Captain Underpants books. I remember really enjoying being read the Junie B. Jones books by my librarian. I actually had a conversation with a former coworker about Junie B. Jones in which I was defending her in a way I did not anticipate because I kind of found Junie B. Jones a little annoying as a character. I'm not going to lie, though I did love my librarian's cosplay of Junie B. Jones. But this coworker who was older than me, which only matters in terms of perceptions, he indicated that he had pushed back against the inclusion of Junie B. Jones in classroom reading. So was he a book banner? I don't know. I didn't want to get into that conversation. But for the example Junie B. Jones set, and I was kind of like, it's not that deep. Part of the conversation around Junie B. Jones that I remember is us talking about the bad choices she was making. And honestly, I think it's important to have that example of the consequences of bad decisions for kids so that they can engage with what the consequences of those decisions are without actually having to face the consequences of those decisions. But that's just me. Anyway, so I had that. I had things like Wayside School, and then we move in to things like Dear America, My America. I didn't read the My America books as much. The Dear America books, the Royal Diaries. I still very much remember, and I know I talked about this in the other video, picking out the Elizabeth I Royal Diaries book and how that started an interest in Tudor fiction for me. In second grade, here's a throwback. I actually had to look up the title of the series. There was a series called The Jewel Kingdom books, and I remember there were 4 of us in second grade in my class that were obsessed with these books to the point where we assigned each other princesses. There was a princess for every jewel, or at least 4 jewels. And I cannot remember if I was Emerald or Ruby, but I remember we would like basically cosplay or play out these kingdoms on the playground to the point where there were, oh, this is embarrassing. Okay, there were like companions, like magical companions for every princess. And I think we somehow had people roped into playing the companions. Listen, I never got to be part of any of the Spice Girl groups because I wasn't allowed to listen to Spice Girls outside of the little bit of Wannabe that my keyboard played. And listen, I've looked back on this because I don't remember it well, and I do have concerns that maybe it was too cliquey. I do, but I also think that it was just nerdy enough that I don't know if it qualifies. But then beyond that, I also, of course, enjoyed series like Artemis Fowl. I went through biography phases in elementary too, where I would get like super focused on a particular figure that had a decent number of biographies. So I remember reading multiple biographies about people like Helen Keller or Harriet Tubman, and for some reason Patrick Henry. I could not tell you anything about Patrick Henry today. I think it was Patrick Henry. It was some revolutionary figure, but nonetheless, and that probably fed into my love of Anne Rinaldi historical fiction as a teen, but that's another conversation. So there are a lot of books that shaped me, and actually, Audrey, I'm gonna count that as an answer to your question, what were your favorite childhood reads? Because I don't want to put anyone through this mental exercise again. Next question is, what questions would you ask your favorite booktubers? And I don't know. I think it would probably be more back end stuff in the sense of like existential back end. Like, how do you feel about your channel? How do you engage with the work and with reading for reviewing or this or that or the other, as well as like what your favorite things about doing this are, what the challenges of doing this are. I don't know. A lot of the questions that are going to be asked in this tag, or the next question for sure, is what challenges do you think starting a booktube channel will be the hardest to overcome? And I guess I can talk about this with a lot more kind of retrospect in the sense that I think what I thought from the beginning is still hard, in the sense of finding your community and knowing that you're going to be kind of talking into the void for a long time and feeling very kind of isolated in that. It can be very hard not to define yourself by the numbers, not to have imposter syndrome, not to feel like you are less than somehow when comparing yourself to others on a bad day. And on a good day, you know that that's not why you're here and it's fine. But I would be lying if I said that insecurity didn't exist. It's hard to continue to do the thing when you feel like nobody cares. And finding an audience is hard, right? There are so many people out there are so many creators out there, and it's hard to kind of find your way through the noise. Some days it's hard for me to not be judgmental on myself physically while I'm editing, which, please, I am not inviting anyone else to do that, but it is just a fact of it when you're staring at your face, especially when you've realized you have a mascara that has a habit of transferring midway through a video. And if no one had noticed that before, now that's all you're gonna notice. But just continuing to go on even when it feels like nobody may care. And it's interesting too, because there are like the waves of what people are interested in. Like, I obviously get much more engagement on Bridgerton videos, which I love talking about Bridgerton, and finding an audience that cares about my opinions on Bridgerton is very humbling and it makes me very happy. But I know that my opinions on other things are not going to perform as well as Bridgerton, and I have to kind of remind myself why I'm here. One, I'm reflecting my reading life to the best of my ability because I am a mood reader with a day job, and I can only really do what I do. In that, there are only so many hours in the day. I do try to do creative videos and have fun with things, and I'm continually trying to up my ante there, but it is something I really have to plan out. And I care about talking about the books that I'm interested in and bringing attention to things. And so even though some of the books I talk about I know aren't really going to get views, I find value in talking about those books and having those books out there, even if it is maybe not a fully positive review or even a positive review at all, because I value you being able to trust that I'm being honest and being honest, and also having a kind of range to look at in terms of my personal taste, because your taste is going to be different than my taste. So if you can get an idea of what I like versus what I don't like, you may realize that something I don't like is something that you really like. So if I'm saying I didn't respond well to this thing, or this didn't work for me, which I always try to be very subjective about and try my best to articulate the mechanics of why something doesn't work, even though there is inherently just an emotional reaction sometimes, but that may read very differently for you. And so that is the thought process there. The next question is, when did you start reading? I'm going to take this very literally. I don't remember the age, but I remember it was earlier than kindergarten, I think. My aunt is a kindergarten teacher, and she has always read to me. My parents have always read to me. I would be taken to the teacher store a lot when I was little. It was one of my favorite places. There were lots of books. I remember going to a book signing for Tommy DePaula at the teacher store. It had another name. We called it the teacher store. We would always leave with a new pencil. They had a wall of pencils. Listen, I've never pretended not to be a nerd. So I remember reading Hop on Pop with my aunt, and the story goes, though it's not like an oft-told story, but how I have heard it is that I started to read Hop on Pop with my aunt while we were reading it together. Now, my adult brain goes, did I just memorize it? I don't know, but there was apparently nothing in my subsequent development of literary and phonics skills that set off any alarm bells. Now, again, it's important to remember that I had early childhood educators in my life that knew how to teach these things, and so I was being subtly taught from a young age. I remember even when we went on a cross-country road trip vacation to the beach, my aunt and parents and family like packed us little activities for the different rest stops to keep us entertained, and a lot of them had an educational focus. Like we had an index card flip book with the letters written on every page, and we were supposed to write down things we saw that correlated with every letter. Anyway, when you come from a family of educators, education, of course, is emphasized. The good news is, because I came from a family of educators and my mom was a teacher, reading or my books being taken away, which probably would have been admittedly the best punishment for me as a child, was never used as a punishment because my mom just couldn't bring herself to take books away. So I probably took advantage of that. I wasn't a bad kid, but I'm sure there are times that my books deserve to be taken away. Okay, last question of the main question set, because I recognize that yet again, I am yapping, but I hope you're here along for the ride with me. What kind of books do you like to read? This feels like kind of a loaded question. Historically, I have joked that I will read just about anything except for Westerns. What I mean by that generally is the Louis L'Amour style of Westerns. But there are obviously genres that I gravitate to. I gravitate toward fantasy, speculative fiction, literary fiction, historical fiction, though I have not been reading as robustly in historical fiction recently, which I think can be traced to the popularity mostly of World War II era fiction, since like 2014-ish, I would say, has been the predominant historical fiction I have seen, though of course there are a lot of titles that aren't within that era that I need to catch up on, and that is of course just personal preference. I like fantasy, I like paranormal, I of course love historical romance. I like nonfiction, especially when it engages with cultural criticism, especially of pop culture or things in the zeitgeist. I like nonfiction about really kind of obscure things. I like nonfiction about scams. So just a myriad of things. If it is of interest, I will read it. I like thrillers and mysteries on occasion, though they are by no means my main genre. But yeah, okay, so moving on to some of the questions that were submitted from you. First question is, have you read books by Anne Rice or Mercedes Ron? I have read one Anne Rice book. It was Memnoch the Devil. It scared me. I talked about it in my Books That Scared Me series. I know the logical question is, Melody, why did you read something so far into the Interview with a Vampire series without having read Interview with a Vampire? It was the only book that was currently available at the library. Libraries of the 2000s were a much different beast. I do have this used copy I bought for apparently $4 of Interview with the Vampire that I have not yet read, but I did bring back with me from my childhood bedroom. So it's just a matter of slotting it into the TBR. I did have this idea because the TV show is out and is so popular that I really should get this read so that I can watch the show, though I of course will not have the depth of lore knowledge to really fully understand it. I did enjoy, I'm not gonna lie, watching all of the Vampire Chronicles fanfiction pop up after Anne Rice passed, but that's a different thing. I have not read any Mercedes Ron. Next question from Angela is, would you ever do a vlog themed video centered on certain authors? Yes, I have toyed with this. I have kind of done one on Julie Garwood, though it wasn't very vloggy. I have been trying to find the right balance in vlogging, and I recognize that's kind of silly. I live in Chicago, there's so much to show, though I do value kind of the privacy of myself and others out and about, though maybe we will sneak in some Christmas in the city content yet this winter. Fingers crossed, I don't know. I don't want to make any promises I can't keep. So I kind of talked or dug specifically into her a little there. But yes, it is something I have considered. It just takes me out of the TBR and potentially Feature Friday reading a little bit more. And I also am always kind of fighting this, I want to say it's a dramaturgical urge, but I don't think it is. I think it's just me to feel like I need to like have an expertise on a thing before I talk about it. And I don't have an expertise on most things, and yet I continue to talk about things here with you all. So I'm working on that, clearly. The next question, which has probably just been answered by my uploads, is are you planning on doing more videos on book adaptions? Yes, I've done videos this year since Bridgerton on My Lady Jane and Uglies. I'm hoping, fingers crossed, to have things to say about Interior Chinatown upcoming. I need to reread the book because I'm very interested in how the form of that book, which is so inventive, translates on screen, especially because I think they're playing with that weirdness, but I don't think it fully comes out in the trailer. So we may circle back to that yet this year or early next year. We will see. But yes, I'm very much open to talking about other adaptations. Oh, I talked about Wicked too. Yes. So yeah, we'll see if there are things of interest to either swing back to or upcoming. Who knows what 2025 is going to bring? But the short answer is yes. Next questions come from Audrey. I answered the first one. What were your favorite childhood reads? And then she asked, also, if you aren't subscribed to Audrey, go do that. What's your most reread book? And I think it's still, I went through a lot of rereading in my teen years compared to now. This year actually has been my biggest reread year in a long time, and a lot of those are mostly for the sake of looking at adaptations, but I think it is probably still Pride and Prejudice. And I don't know that I've reread Pride and Prejudice since high school, college, but I went through a phase of reading that book quite a lot. That being said, I am still at least a little bit afraid of the Jane Austen fandom. Not you in particular as a fan of Jane Austen, but fandoms in general. I think we can understand that. Okay, last question, which may end up being a bigger video, but I want to at least give you some titles. You mentioned you enjoy historical romances. Please recommend your faves besides Bridgerton. Absolutely. I think I'm gonna go authors here for now, and I'm inevitably going to miss authors I love. From the same era as Bridgerton, when I was first discovering romance, some of my favorites were, of course, Julia Quinn, but also Julie Garwood. And then also at the time, I was really, really into time travel romance. And within those, I loved Lynn Kurland and Karen Marie Moning. With Karen Marie Moning, then you can springboard into the Fever series, which is a paranormal series, if you like that sort of thing. Very on brand for the 2000s. And then since then, some of my favorites, especially recently, have been, while not as recent, I do adore Alyssa Cole's historical series, and I miss her as a romance author so much. I of course love the likes of Lisa Kleypas and Tessa Dare and Beverly Jenkins, who are giants of the industry that I came to just a little bit later than a lot of those earlier authors. Additionally with that, authors that I discovered in my early 20s that are now kind of established authors for me include the likes of Sarah MacLean and Joanna Shupe, who are giants of the genre. And recently I have discovered the likes of Diana Quincy and Adriana Herrera and Harper St. George, who I discovered recently, who also writes Gilded Age romances. And then of course there are the kind of go-tos that I slip in when I can. People like Loretta Chase, Elizabeth Hoyt. There are just so many authors in this subgenre that I love, and it's hard because a lot of these authors' backlists are so extensive that I feel like I cannot speak to them with any sense of authority because I've not read the entire backlist. Even with someone like Lisa Kleypas, I have not read the entire backlist. My confession is that I started reading Kleypas with the Ravenel series, and if you remember, if you've been here long enough, I first read the Wallflowers series just like 3-ish years ago, and now of course that is very much established in my romantic canon, and of course that's a much beloved series. So now I'm worried I've forgotten people. I know I've forgotten authors. There are so many authors I love in historical romance, and especially coming on the heels of a lot of the discourse regarding historical romance, I'm sure that we will talk about historical romance more, especially as we are coming up on a year where we won't have any Bridgerton. So it's a perfect opportunity to get into some more historical romance if Bridgerton was your entryway into the subgenre. I forgot Cat Sebastian. I love Cat Sebastian's historicals since she started publishing with Avon. Now we've seen her kind of branch out in terms of the different eras she's exploring, but if you have not read Cat Sebastian, absolutely read Cat Sebastian. Additionally, Olivia Waite, especially personally, The Lady's Guide to Celestial Mechanics. Love that book. So we will circle back to more historical romance. Do not worry. but those are some of my favorites just off the top of my head. I did not prepare a list or anything, so I know that in editing I'm going to be kicking myself over who I forgot. So surely we'll have to talk about romance some more in order to rectify that inevitable omission. So yeah, those are the questions, and I probably already talked more than I should for a quick little tag video. Maybe that is why I don't do tags as much, but if you would like to see me do more tags, let me know. If there are directions you would like to see this channel go, or things you would like to see from this channel, I should say, let me know. Or let me know if you have further questions, but it is wonderful to meet you yet again, and thank you for hanging in this long and being interested in what I have to say. I very much appreciate it, and I very much appreciate you. So here is to the start of ending 2024 strong and looking forward to all of the reading in 2025. So we'll see how much I see you over this Bookmas. But like and subscribe if you feel like it, read something good, and yeah, bye.